Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, November the 1st, 2018. It's 8 a.m. New York time. That's 5 a.m. Los Angeles time. And let's see, we're not yet at daylight savings changeover, so it's 12 noon in London at this particular point in time. And this is your daily dose of happy. And Joel is back after a week away. It always seems like, even though I have all these shows every day, Joel, it always seems like it's a long time between our shows. So when they come, I'm really glad when they get here.
Well, I certainly always enjoy it, and I guess when you're doing it every day, I have no point of reference for that. But I guess if you're doing it every day, it would seem like, wow, I've done a lot of shows. But in my world, it's like life happens so fast. It's like, well, did we do it yesterday or the day before? So,
That's right. Yes.
It's sort of like where we always end up. It's all about perspective.
Perspective is everything. Oh my goodness, it's everything. I've been discovering that in new and interesting and exciting ways lately. Just how big perspective really is, because it's huge. But it's good. It's good. It's good to recognize the role of perspective and to recognize that everybody's perspective isn't the same as yours. That's something that's been a big thing lately. As I've been looking at what's out there in popular culture and the news and politics and so forth, people are often forgetting that other people's perspectives aren't the same as theirs. And the interesting thing is, when you forget that other people's perspectives are different, you set yourself up by doing so.
Well, and this it's really amazing. And I know we have a topic to get to, but I find it amazing that you've mentioned this, because just last night, I was on Facebook, and one of my really good friends, lifelong friends, a really good guy. We're not always politically in tune, but really a good person, and we're able to, bypass the political stuff and make fun of it often. So any of my interactions on Facebook is always intended to be positive or lighthearted. I never have any intent of offending. So we had a series of posts going back and forth, and one of them, I said, well, at least you're being honest. And he wrote back, he said, well, that's my downfall. I'm always honest. And I said, and it still seems very benign to me. I said, well, at least you always believe you're honest.
Yeah, that's a good way to start one.
Well, I mean that for me, and I
of
mean
course.
that for everybody else. And he said, I'm offended that you would call me a pathological liar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa. First of all, no intent to offend, and it is simply our truth is our perspective. Mm-hmm. And when that's a big message that I think relays to most people, and that's what gets lost especially in politics and different beliefs in religion and stuff. We have different truths, and our truth, is based on our experiences, what we've been through, and those truths are different. So I really, really offended this guy.
Wow.
And he views what I said as him being a pathological liar. Now, I don't know what's going on in his life, and I don't know what's dictating his perspective right now. That was not my intent, and this gentleman is exceptionally honest and does not in any way, maybe that's why he is so concerned about what I'm saying, but it is never intended that way, and I was, and I want to give it a day or two, and I'm going to give him a text and say, look, I don't know the spectrum of your perspective of the life. I have said similar things multiple times, and for some reason he interpreted that. And this really isn't even about him. This is simply about a perspective that he's viewing a post that I had 0 point of. I never go on Facebook to offend. I really don't. It's always positive. It's always joking. And so in the middle of what I thought was our normal joking back and forth, he interpreted that as very much an attack on his character, I guess.
Oh, I run into that a lot with politics. Anytime I try to avoid talking politics these days, but I used to do it a lot with people. And the simple fact is, politics is one of those realms where people believe that perspective really has nothing to do with it. It's all about objective fact, and you're either stating the objective fact or you're not stating the objective fact, and it's black and white, which is not true, but that's the way most people look at it these days, which is really it's kind of indicative of where our culture is at, but people just treat things like they're objectively black and white, true or false. Very simple.
Yes, yes, and that's important to at least to me, is understanding that, feeling that, going through that, and really living in a place where there is. I used to be a very black and white person.
Mm-hmm.
It was very simply, I thought something to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been through what I've been through and seen what I've seen, and I use this example just because it's what I use all the time when I'm giving talks, but you get some young man or young woman born in inner city Baltimore, which is a really rough area, and some person born in Midtown Manhattan
mm-hmm.
with great privilege and one of great, they truly have a different view of our country.
Completely.
It's not completely. That you cannot expect their view to be the same. I can get very mad they don't see it the way I see it, but they grew up with a different view of it. It's and the best analogy that I've heard, and I don't claim I use it all the time, but I don't remember where I got it or who I got it from. But if you look at, I could have pictures of, let's pick some random thing. Let's take say the Statue of Liberty, and I can give you 50 different pictures from different angles of the Statue of Liberty and the surrounding areas of where I'm taking it from. If I'm taking it from a really, really dilapidated part of New York toward the Statue of Liberty, you saw that, and the light wasn't right. It's like, that's sort of it's a little, ugh.
Mm.
Or if I take it at night with the beautiful lights lighting it up, and from Midtown Manhattan, where you got all this incredible beauty around you.
Right.
Wow, that's one of the nicest places in the world. I read recently that there is in Paris, France, there is a hotline to call. This is true, Walt. This is going to sound crazy. There's a hotline to call for people who get to Paris and are disappointed.
Really?
It is, yes. It is, because you see, when I say Paris, the average person who has not been to Paris, you're thinking, I don't know what you're thinking, but you could be thinking, wow, all these beautiful, the Eiffel Tower and all this gorgeous,
the Left Bank, the Arc de Triomphe, all that, yeah. The Louvre.
Yeah. Thanks for bailing me out there. And but the point is, there's people that get there, and while that stuff is going to be beautiful introspectively, or it may be within the moment, the city of Paris is like any other city.
Yeah.
It's got some really rough areas. It's grimy in certain parts, and it's not that the people spend a lifetime wanting to go there, expecting this, and they're disappointed. They literally have a hotline to help people sort of vent that the city is not what they thought it would be, because their perspective or their view was dictated in a certain way. And I just, I know this isn't where we were planning on going with the show today, but the way you started, it really hit home, because that is, one of my next books is Perspective, the Human Superpower. And it's getting more and more relevant in my environment to see just how perspective plays out. And everybody's perspective, especially with the peripheral, I can't say that word today, the increasing use of social media is huge, where you're getting so many diverse different views, and then there's more and more, and I'm not trying to blame anybody. I mean, our political environment's weird, but even within the spectrum of the political thing, you'll hear people make exacting statements as fact, and so much of it is opinion.
Right.
And that is, who is the greatest president of all times? You will hear that, and so much of it takes place from a perspective of what you grew up with. And it's amazing. Mm-hmm. I have a really dear friend that is extremely Democrat. I mean, extreme. I mean, very, very Bernie Sanders level, that way over their side,
Right.
And very nice lady, and she's very, very liberal. And she called George Bush years ago the Antichrist.
Really?
And I said, well, that's giving him a lot of power there, I laughed about that. I think George Bush loves our country, whether you agree with it or not. And she recently said, George Bush is one of the finest men we've ever had in office.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what happened? She said, well, since things have changed, my perspective of what it really. So from her perspective, she really sees where George Bush isn't so far off from where she was at versus what her perception of what we have right now is so far off.
Right.
So
yeah.
her perspective has adjusted because she sees, again, from her perception, a different level of what she thought was out there is so far out there now that she changed her view. And so the perspective is it changes, and we have the ability to change. And there's a lot of people that really fight that change because it at some level you have to admit you're wrong, or at least you did not always have that same perspective. My beliefs in the world are so far from where they were even 15 years ago. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. No, it is amazing. And the thing that I've noticed is that, for myself anyway, over time, I don't think of myself as being wrong because I don't think that's really a productive way to look at it. But I think of myself as having changed my perspective and changed the way I think about something. And sometimes for the worse. But generally recognizing that, what used to be, it's kind of like what you just described. When you're in the middle of something, it feels really, really bad. When you look back on it, it doesn't seem so bad, no matter how bad it was.
Right.
There's always something worse. On the other hand, there's always something better. It's both. You get both sides of it. But because it's in the rear view mirror, the reaction is, well, those are the good old days, which is really strange because that's not the way we were looking at it at the time. But in the past, okay, those are the good old days.
Yeah, and that's so much. That's so amazing how like your perception. I heard these two gentlemen. They give a talk, and these are they're older gentlemen, and one's African American, really nice guy. The other's a old country white guy, really nice guy, and they've been friends for years. But they politically were on very off. They grew up in two different 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
They lived 5 miles apart, but they grew up in totally different worlds. And to hear them, you hear the one gentleman who grew up in the at the time the very pervasive huge middle class in the United States, in a white family where it's easy to get a job and you can have one job and take care of. You can even you pump gas at a gas station. It was a salary that you could live on, and so it was really from his perspective there was no crime. It was great times. There was low unemployment, and people they believed in God the way he believed in God. So things were great. So you hear him describe the 50s, you're like, wow, I really miss those 50s. Well, then you hear the other gentleman describe, he's not trying to be negative, but he grew up in an incredibly different 1950s. And he talks about the inequalities. His uncle was lynched over allegedly having a consensual affair with a white woman. It was, a lot of the women in his community were raped, and just there was no justice. And he describes it not in a victim role, but just saying, as he explains what he saw the 50s at. Now he also he thought his family was closer when they were in extreme poverty. He has a view that's now he's very wealthy, by the way. He's worked his way, but he views. He said in some ways, the wealth has given me options, but it's also my family's not as close as we were when we really had to, we didn't have anything to do. So we had to sit around and tell stories and sing music and pretty much the stereotypical view of that. And he said that he misses that as well. But so much is it perspective. And I think that the answer for us, for all of us, is to wake up in this, the realization that all perspectives are personal and they're on a spectrum. And there isn't a right or wrong that we're so all desperately seeking. So when someone looks at for example, just using again, not getting political, but using examples, someone who truly is a believer that President Trump is protecting us from the hordes that are moving up from the south. He's going to send troops down there. Thank God for that.
Yeah, right.
And then there's another perspective of well, that's just absolutely ludicrous. We have so many more problems than a few thousand people that are 1,000 miles away from our border, and this is clearly a political move to get it, blah blah blah. And you have all these views, when in reality, your views are totally dictated what's important to you and what's going on in your life. It's like, I have a friend who lives in Russia who laughs at what we call poverty.
Yeah.
He said, your poorest people are our middle class. And he said, we have no safety net here. We have no safety net. You don't eat. It's called survival of the fittest over there. You don't eat, you don't eat, and you don't have food stamps. The idea that, and so his perspective is we're all crazy and that we're all spoiled, and it's like,
well, it reminds me when I was growing up. It reminds me when I was growing up, and I didn't even discover. I discovered the first half of the 50s as you described it for most of the time growing up. I didn't even learn about the second half until I was well into high school toward college. And when I learned about it, the shock to my system was so great because I said to myself, how could this be the same country? How could that possibly be? On the one hand, you have this one picture of idyllic. On the other hand, you have this country that is a horror story. How could that possibly be the same country? And I suspect that there are a lot of people who simply can't handle that dichotomy, and so they reject half of it, whichever half is appropriate for them to reject. And that's why they have so much trouble with perspective, because it's a shock. It's a shock to the system to see two really, really different kinds of countries in the same country.
And the narrative that there is one right answer is where everybody gets their frustration. If you just saw it the way I saw it, you would understand it versus
right.
I try to understand how they're viewing it and what they've been through. I know, as you know, I work with foster care children and trying to find them homes, and also doing counseling when I can with them. And one of the pervasive thoughts they have, or one of the experience they have, is imagine being a child ripped from your home and having no one to back you up, and probably half the people in your life have. They don't have the best of your intentions. They don't really care about what or you're an object to obtain something, whether it's sexual or just get money. And so you're not treated fairly, and you have no voice. And it's one of the most underrepresented populations in our country because they're the weakest. There's no population for very few advocates that really hit home for foster care kids because, a lot of times they act like little asses, and and you say, God, he's so obnoxious. It's like, well, how would you act if, these things happen to you? And so to hear their voice and then help them learn a perspective that they're in charge of it is empowering to them. The same as to everyone that is listening, your perspective, it gives you the opportunity to say, let me look at someone else's perspective. I don't have to agree with where they're going with it.
Right.
But if I understand how they got there, that's like the concept of the kneeling for the flag and all that other stuff. It's two entirely different perspectives that neither side listens to.
Yeah.
They're just convinced the other side is out to destroy them. When in reality, if you hear both, you don't have to agree with the other side. But when you hear both sides, you understand why there's such incredible intensity and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
so
no doubt.
For something that wasn't a topic, we sure killed half of the show with that.
Yeah, we did pretty well with that, didn't we? And I do want to take a moment to let people know we've actually been taking steps to make their perspective easier when it comes to finding out how to subscribe to the podcast. Because I've been getting some
nice tie-in there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we've been getting some input from people that even as simplified as we had made it, we hadn't made it simple enough, and people were still having trouble subscribing. So to make it just one step simpler, we are now putting in every single podcast description, because no matter where you go to listen to the podcast, whether you're listening live, like right now we're live streaming to the Law of Attraction Changed My Life group in Facebook. So there's a description that goes with that post, or if you're listening to the podcast in your subscription, and there's a description there that has links in it and so forth. No matter what you're looking at, the description now has links for subscribing with either an iPhone type device or an Android type device. And if you click that, it should just walk you right through the steps. So we're trying to make it as simple as we can. But if you're not yet a subscriber, please do just look in the description, find the link, click it, and walk through it so you can get all the episodes coming right to your smartphone. And if you're an existing subscriber, and for the new ones as well, please keep putting out there on social media, or maybe even start putting out there on social media. Many people haven't even been doing it yet. Please put out on social media that you're listening to LOAtoday.net so that more and more people can get their daily dose of happy. More and more people can get the idea of how perspective works. Perspective is important for everybody to understand and to know so that they can make their own lives better, let alone live peacefully with everybody else, but just to make their own lives better. Perspective is very, very helpful. So, yeah, please help pass the word along because we'd really appreciate that. And speaking of perspective, you mentioned this message that we'd received from one of our listeners and how we'd gone off topic. We actually haven't gone that far off topic, believe it or not, because his message, and we'll read the message that Dan sent to us, his message is clearly a message about trying to understand his own perspective and trying to wrap his head around it. He's actually done a pretty good job. When you hear the message, you'll see what we're talking about. He's actually got most of it figured out, but he's still wrestling with his own perspective. So perspective is everything, and it applies to the main topic of the show today. So, yeah, let me take a moment. I'll read the email that this guy sent. Wonderful email, and then we can discuss it a little bit and see if we can give him a little help, or more precisely, if Joel Elston, life coach extraordinaire, can give him the help, because Joel's the expert anyway. At least that's my perspective. So Dan writes, "Hi, I just wanted to drop a quick message and thank you for the podcast." You're welcome, Dan. We're so glad that you're a listener. He said, "I started listening a few weeks ago as I just happened to stumble on it." Good. That means that all the people who are putting out the messages that they're listening, thank you very much. That's how Dan found us. "I've been studying the law of attraction since 2006 when I first watched The Secret. I listened to Abraham and have had some successes. What I've noticed is that all the good stuff that has happened to my family has come through my wife, but seems to come when I'm feeling good." Interesting dichotomy there. "I know what I've heard is that the law of attraction doesn't work that way, but it seems to for us. Bad stuff happens to our family when I feel down. I've meditated on and off, but lately it has had a huge change in me. I'm well on my way to 4 months of meditating daily. Congratulations. I'm down 55 pounds. Congratulations. Off my CPAP, dropped my insulin, all doctor's orders, and I feel incredible. I wasn't really focusing on the health issues, which is probably why it came, LOL. I'm focused on money, and it isn't coming. It isn't coming. That should tell me something, huh? Well, laughing out loud, anyway, I do have a question that maybe you can help with. What doesn't make sense to me about the law of attraction is that in The Secret they say that you can be doing good, feeling good, doing the work, and then feel like the stuff doesn't work, and all of a sudden what you want goes away. Why does it go away so fast, but take so long to come? Sorry to ramble, but wanted to thank you. It is appreciated, and sometimes it is hard to hear, but usually manageable. Keep up the good work and keep smiling, Dan." So thank you, Dan, first of all, for that message. That's a wonderful message. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Elston, so Dr. Elston can diagnose the message.
Well, one of the things that I'm really excited about when we get messages, and Dan's amazing, and he answers his own question, and he knows that as he's writing it. You can tell he's like, the concept that he's meditating, which, by the way, Dan hits on something there. I don't discuss this often on air. Meditation is a huge part of my life. It took me forever to be able to do it with my really severe ADHD brain. But once I figured out some techniques that work for me, it is incredible conduit to the law of attraction. And as Dan pointed out, he worked on feeling better. He worked his focus wasn't necessarily on losing 55 pounds. However, his focus was on feeling better. And not shockingly, he loses 55 pounds. plus getting off his insulin, which is just a massive, for those of you that have type 2 diabetes that are insulin dependent, or use it, not insulin dependent, that use insulin for your type 2 diabetes, understanding how important that is. He literally changed his structure where his body was not able to produce enough insulin, so he had to add it. So he lost his weight. His health has improved so drastically that he no longer needs to supplement his insulin. His body is now producing enough. And as he states, he feels incredible. So his focus wasn't there. So that happened. It manifested like, wow, I mean, that came up. So his focus on feeling better and a positive thought and all that, it worked. And then he answers his own question with, since I wasn't really focused on health, but I'm focused on money and it isn't coming. And as he said, that should tell me something. Mm-hmm. What we do, and I know he has a more direct question after this, but what we tend to do with the law of attraction, and you and I have had this conversation now for years, it's feeling the emotion of what if you want money, if you need money, you need financial success. It's feeling that you already have it, and the law of attraction will feel it. It picks up on what you feel. It delivers the reality of that. When you're focused on a lack of money, I am worried about money. I am, and when I say that, this is without judgment. One of the hardest things to do within the concept of the law of attraction is when something like that is facing you, really, really facing you, and try not to focus on it. When your mortgage is due tomorrow, try not to focus on the mortgage being due tomorrow. It's almost an impossible statement when you don't have money. So I get it. But his focus on money is really where his resistance lies, because it's focusing on the lack of money, creating more of a lack of money. And again, he realizes that. So the question, I think, how do we avoid that? And is that how you see the question too, Walt?
Oh, well, yeah, I see it in three parts, actually, but you're right. And I would say that's the one that I identify with the most, because as you know, I've had very much the same kind of issue for myself and still continue to, and I'm still working on improving myself in that area. But the whole thing about being so focused on money, and what you're actually focused on is the lack of money. The funny thing is, when you're in the middle of it, you don't think you're focused on the lack of money. I mean, you are. If you looked at it objectively, like from a third-person viewpoint, it'd be clear to anybody else you're focused on the lack. But you yourself, you're not focused on the lack of money. You're focused on, hey, I got to get the money in here. That's not lack of money.
Well, in dissecting the email again, here's what's happening. When he really focused on feeling good, he didn't specifically focus and say, I need to produce more insulin and lose weight.
Right.
However, the law of attraction said, this guy feels good. So his health is now going to match how he feels.
Right.
It wasn't a focus, or if it would be the other way. If I have people who have a ton of money that are in very poor health. They cannot, they're type 2 diabetic. They can't get their health together. They can't eat right. They can't do all these things, and yet they have a ton of money. So money's not it doesn't mean anything to them. They're I have money, a ton of money. However, my health, and so they have the reverse scenario.
Right.
And so when you can, the hard tightrope to walk is truly feeling an abundance when your perception is you don't have an abundance, or you have a lack of money, or a lack of wealth in general. And so when it comes and goes easier. People tend to have the same problems over and over and over. Sometimes generationally, but a lot of times you'll see people that wealthy families. Money's not even an issue to them. It's just expected. It's there. They don't budget. They just spend as much money as they want to do. And it doesn't matter. However, they often have relationship problems, or health problems, or all these other, anxiety problems. I hear a lot of my clients of great wealth have a lot of anxiety over what would seemingly be silly issues to the average person. But it's not to them. It's just as serious as anything else. So the ability to not focus on the lack, or I have to have money, the emotion attached to that is anxiety toward money. So the law of attraction says, okay, that's what you want, more anxiety toward money. And it's like, no, that's what I meant, not what I meant. Well, sorry, that's what you're putting out there. So
yeah, that's hard too. That's really hard because,
no.
I mean, when you're in the middle of it, it's like, but I'm not trying to be anxious. I'm trying to be positive about it. So don't I get like brownie points for that?
Well, we can maybe appeal to the law of attraction to give you brownie points, but it doesn't generally care. It has no emotion. It simply picks up on what you're putting out there. Here, when I was early in my recovery, I had there were multiple times that I made it to the end of the month with barely enough money. There were times when I had change left over, less than $1. It was amazing how I always had just enough, and it usually didn't happen till the very last day of the month to cover what I had to cover. And I mean, every day of my life focused on money. It was, and money was hard to come by. And then at some point I realized, I do seem to every month in a row, I am able to manage this. Now it's never, I might be stumbling across the finish line every month to do it, but I always manage to do it. And so I was able to get to a place of, well, I'm going to be able to get through the month, but I'd like to start putting some money back. And then little by little, my view of it all changed. And, you get to a point where you have an abundance and you're not in that mindset. Like I'm not worried about money. And it's something that just, I don't think about it. Every month I go to pay all my bills. There's money left over. I move it to my investment account. I just don't think about it. I don't budget. I'm not recommending my lifestyle to everyone else, and also at the same time, Walt, I'm not spending from a state of lack either.
Yes.
I don't buy stuff I don't need. But I don't say I have $1,000 this month to spend or whatever. I just don't do that. But I also not making stupid purchases and not buying stuff that I, just simply don't need. So there's a natural, because I don't have a feeling of lack. Since I have an abundance, I don't need to get, it just goes together. There's a meme on Facebook that I was seeing the other day, and it was in one of the law of attraction groups, and it shows, a picture of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett standing together. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but the concept is, Bill Gates is wearing just a watch, not a Rolex, just a watch, like a $100 watch. He's wearing, some Dockers khakis, and, his whole outfit costs, $200, and Warren Buffett's probably was even less than that. And these guys could buy any clothing manufacturer they want to, and then they show a picture of the average person running around with a $300 purse or wallet or wearing $400 shoes. And I'm not critical of whatever you want to have. This isn't about that, but it's about those guys just don't care. It's not a thing for them. It's not a, Warren Buffett still lives in the same house he had for years. It's just, now he might have 50 other houses. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a place either. But his primary residence is the one he's had for years. So you get the idea that what you're putting out there, if you feel like you're lacking, or I got to do this, and as our good friend Dan points out, the stuff that he isn't focused on in the process of this is just stellar. He feels incredible in those areas.
Right.
The stuff he is focused on is where he sees the resistance. And that is the $1 million answer. That's where we come in of how that vibrational feeling of what do you do. And there's multiple techniques. You have to figure out what works for you. But it is so incredibly, for me, it was so incredibly difficult. It took that part of the law of attraction took me the longest to quote unquote master. Where it just, because the other stuff, I've always believed my health is good. I mean, I do. I come from very good genes. I'm in great shape. I work out daily. I don't worry about my health at all. I feel great again because I eat well. All that's a reality for me. So that's not even a thing.
Right.
I'm happy. I'm happy in the relationship that I have, and the person that she's great, perfect relationship for me. It's not a major event in my life, but it's someone that gets how I am with that. So all of those areas are great. My job, I love my job. I love what I do for a living. But the money piece to me is where my energy used to go. And the only anxiety for years I would have was involving money or thinking way down the road, or, if a client, all of a sudden is like, okay, well, I don't think I need to be coming as often. In the beginning, I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? Well, 5 more clients will show up. I know that I'll do. I'll just see more clients. It's just not but at the time you feel that. And so as Dan's explaining, he wants to break out of that. So if he could apply the same principles to the money side of this that he did to the health side of it, Dan will quickly fill the void, or fill the lack of what he's perception lack of, with the abundance that exists that he has already found for his health.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I'm still working on this myself, and I've been making it a project, in a sense, to really work on this part for myself lately, for a number of reasons. One of the things that there are a couple things I've become really cognizant of in the last few days alone. One is, when we think about money, we usually are trying to attract the money in. We're trying to think about how do we get more of that coming in, and so that's where the focus is. But I've also been realizing lately it's even more important to focus on how the money is going out, because when you have that lack mentality, like I've had for many, many years, and I'm trying to overcome it. When you have that lack mentality, when the money goes out, you turn it into a torture chamber. That's what I do anyway. I turn it into a torture chamber. Right. Instead of like what you're talking about, which is treat it like it isn't even part of your day hardly. You don't give any thought to it. You don't give any consideration. You're just paying the bill. It's a bill to be paid. That's all it is. Yeah. So that's one of the things I've been working on, is getting myself to just treat the bill. It's like, this is just a bill to be paid. That's all it is. I pay the bill and I don't give it any more attention than that. And that has helped to some degree. Yes. That has helped to some degree. That has made things better, made things easier for me to handle, if nothing else.
One of the things that helped me a lot, and again, I'll just say for me, and I know not everyone should be in the position, but I'll get an unexpected something come in. You forget about it, or oh wow, this came up. Or the other day, we went on vacation, and I think toward the end of August, and we always try to have a really good time when I go, and I don't pay a lot of attention. Well, when the American Express bill came, I have a normal American Express bill that I expect every month. And, I'm not thinking about it. So when the bill, everything comes on the email, and when it came up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 3 times what it normally is. Mm. Well, my initial reaction for a split second was, oh no. And then I immediately knew that was an old feeling. I'm like, I am so grateful. I said, let me pay this. It wouldn't do for a month. Let me pay it right now in full. I'm not worried about it. And I did. I just, I did it from a point of gratitude. I'm so grateful this isn't a thing. I'm so grateful that this isn't and you're living in with that. You're like, oh wow, it's just this awakening when you can see it that way. When you can. You get to that point of having the ability, and if you don't have the ability to pay it off, pay what you can immediately. Release it out there and say, awesome. And I don't write checks anymore. Very seldom do I ever write checks. But if I do, I always write thank you in the note. Thank you for this. Thank you for your service. Or, I do send every year, because I do want a hard copy when I pay my IRS check. And this is a hard pill to swallow. But I will write, I am grateful for the ability to contribute toward my country and its success.
Wow!
Thank you. Wow. Every year, and I'm sure they're looking at it going, "What a dumbass." I'm sure they're probably thinking that when they look. Well,
it depends what their perspective is. Maybe they're the other perspective that says, "Wow, I'm so appreciative of that."
Yeah, but I really believe that way. Now, while I don't agree with 90% of where we're spending our money, I'm grateful that I can contribute. I'm grateful that I'm in a position to make enough money. When I pay a lot of taxes, instead of looking at it like, oh my God, I got to write this huge check for taxes, I look at it, I am so grateful I'm making enough money that this is what I have to pay. Mm-hmm. I want to pay more taxes next year because I make a lot more money.
This is true, yeah. Yeah, that's the way that works. The other thing that I picked up just 2 days ago, there's a movie out that I had never heard of before. Have you heard of the movie E-Motion?
No, I have not.
Interesting movie. It's not really really well organized. It's a little bit airy fairy the way they put it together, but it's got some good stuff in it. It's literally emotion and the law of attraction. That's really what the movie's about. One of the points that one of the presenters made. Two of the major presenters you'll recognize. One of them is Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the Conversations with God series, and the other is Dr. Joe Dispenza. Those are two of the presenters in the book, or in the movie rather. But at one point in the movie, one of the presenters, I don't remember what his name was. I'd never seen him before, never heard of him before. But he was talking about this topic, the topic of people having trouble attracting money into their lives. And his point is one that you've made and other of my co-hosts who are also life coaches have made, that I've been trying to apply a little more attention to lately. But this, for some reason, this one really hit home with me. He pointed out that if you have the same pattern over and over again with money, and you're continually playing out like, just getting by or always feeling frustrated by bill paying or, whatever it is, something about money that's just giving you a hard time. You're just not getting anywhere in terms of attracting the money in the way you want to. It often means that you have some kind of an emotional block in the way. So what you want to be doing is trying to identify what that emotional block is and work through it and get it out of your way so that the money can start flowing in. Now, that's a fairly basic concept, but for some reason it resonated with me when I saw the movie a couple days ago. And I can't say I've honestly figured that part out, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about it a little bit. What's one of the best ways that you know of to kind of get those emotional blocks out of the way?
Well, the first thing is to identify it, because and I do agree with that, but I do think that the emotional blocks can be years in the making. They can be handed down from generation to generation.
Oh, yeah.
They can be things happening right now. And so understanding what the emotional block is, sometimes, whether it's with money, you've heard me use the natural instinct or the natural desire that keeps most people from changing a situation is the body's tendency for homeostasis. It wants to stay safe and secure. And no matter how it may not seem to us that we're safe and secure, if you have a roof over your head, a lot of people don't leave jobs that they hate because of the fear of not being able to get a job. You'll hear that all the time. Don't leave a job. And by the way, I'm not suggesting anyone leave a job until you have another job. But don't do this because of you're not going to. You're doing it out of a fear base. So the emotional blocks can be many things. But if you can identify the emotional block and then really start undoing that in a sense, rewiring that, and trying to call it out for what it is. Can I handle the abundance? Can I handle do I want the responsibility with abundance, or do I want to change? Or the truth is I just say I want to change because it clearly I should want to change. So I'm just saying this. And that's one of the questions that I always ask is, I have this gentleman right now that's a really good friend as well, but I'm helping him out in a sort of professional capacity, and he has a relationship issue, and he finds the woman of his dreams, but yet he's sabotaging the relationship. And I'm like, well, I have to ask the question. I said, I don't know. I'm not trying to plant something here, but do you really want a relationship? Because you found what you claim you want, and now you're doing these things to push the relationship. You're behaving in a way to push it away. And so sometimes we make an assumption that we want something, or it's been said. I've had that incongruence in my life as well, where I logically say I want this, but my actions say the total reverse of that. And that's really, really important, that when we're looking at for the emotional block, part of it is, do I really want what I think I want? And that's pretty cool if you can figure that out.
Yeah, well, you mentioned generational stuff, because generationally, I've been realizing. In fact, Louise and I were having a conversation about it just last night, because I had been really working with this and struggling with it at times too, and just trying to get a grip on what's going on with my life. And during our conversation, she, of course, as you know, Louise has a therapeutic background. She was a therapist for 10 years. she was trying to, she tries not to be my therapist, but she was trying to, give me some help in that way. And in the course of, she was asking me some questions, and in the course of trying to answer those questions, I found myself talking about a situation with my mom growing up that I hadn't given any thought to in a long time. And the most amazing part about it is that as I look back on the conversation and as I look back on that time, I can't see any connection between that and not succeeding at attracting money in. The two seem to be so totally, completely disconnected. And yet, as I was helping, as she was helping me focus on, what is it in my past, what kind of monetary history do I have in my family and so forth, that's what came up. And that was disconcerting for me. How could it be that something comes up that doesn't, on the surface, seem to have any connection to money? So I say that to point out that when you're looking for, trying to find out what it is that emotional block might be, you have to kind of accept almost anything that comes, because you never really know whether or not it's connected. You can't just logically connect it together and say, oh, yes, there's a definite connection there. It doesn't always work that way.
Absolutely. That's what makes it so difficult. I mean, I saw clearly, sometimes the easier examples, when you have the more underlying things, they're harder to find. When my mom, when I was younger, probably about 7 or 8 years old, I have a very specific memory. My mom had divorced my biological father at that time, and of course she married the man that I call my dad. And so we had a very difficult few years. And she truly was working a single mom, working a job in a bank, and I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm making $100 a week or something, very small, and so we're truly looking back. It's fearful. It brings up a fear to even think of having lived that way. And so I remember we got home. My grandmother kept us after school, and my mom drove home and was going to cook dinner. And when we got to our mobile home, I remember, I'll never forget this. Mom opened the mail and just started crying. Well, I'm going, what's wrong? And she said, our mobile home insurance went up $50. And I don't have the money. And I was like, even at 8, I'm going, oh my God, that's horrible. And I could see where her fear and her anxiety and her, all of that. And I, even at 8 years old, I remember going, there will be a day in my life where $50 just never will ever be anything. It's nothing. It won't be anything. And I try to remember and that stuck with me. And as I had to struggle with my own stuff, and I watched my mom through her entire life. She married my dad, who was very successful, but she never got away from money being an issue in her life. And as time went on, she changed a lot of my dad's perspective to the other way, that he never worried about money and always had plenty. And then near the back end of their working career, my dad's still alive, my mom has passed, and they're all set. He's all set up now, but he started having a fear-based existence with money and started losing all his money. And so it does have gravity and if you sit around and worry about it, but there's origins for almost everything. It doesn't have to be family related. It could be a lot of people who've been through divorce, who on either side of it, they either were ripped. People were barely making it when they're married, and also now two households are trying to live off of one income. One person doesn't want to pay, the other person wants more, and money becomes a thing. And you see couples that were actually doing pretty well together, when they get divorced, are both now in fear based of money. And so money is, and then you look on TV, and you look at what everybody else is doing. You look at how everybody else appears to have plenty of money, and I'm the one that doesn't. So now you're adding that emotional barrier that somehow I'm not able to keep up or let, my son Justin, for those that have been following our podcast for a while, I adopted Justin a couple of years ago from the foster care system. He's doing really well. But like the other day, he mentioned to me, he said, we need a bigger house. Why? And he said, well, so-and-so lives in this we live in a really good neighborhood. You have a great house. But so-and-so lives in this other neighborhood that his perception is, and they have a massive house. They have like 4 kids. So they have this big, huge house. And I said, son, we have 2 people living in a 2,500 square foot home. We're good. We're really good. That's, you know, I don't like yard work. We got a small yard. This house that we saw on for side. He has a for sale sign up on it. It's like 10 acres. I'm like, I don't want 10 acres of land.
Yeah.
No. And so again, from his perspective, it was in a comparison thing. So a lot of people get in comparison mode, and I choose what is important to me. My furniture, I know people that buy one piece of furniture that costs more than the entire furnishings in my house. It's and I'm good with that. I don't need a $10,000 couch.
Right.
I really don't. I'm good with that. But I don't judge anyone that's important to. But when we start comparing I buy nice cars. I shouldn't be driving cars in people's opinion that I drive, but I would rather spend my money on nicer cars. So that's something that's cool to me. And so we all have our thing, but if you judge, if you try to have everything that everybody else has, you're going to appear to have a lack. And that's where a lot of this emotional stuff comes into, is a comparison. I'm not up with my peers, or the other people. I'm not at this point in my life that other people are. And that's a really frustrating mindset. And it creates an emotional feeling of lack that's really deep.
I can understand that. And I also wanted to elaborate a little bit on what I was talking about earlier about how the emotional thing can seem completely disconnected, and you can't possibly see how there's a connection to it when you're digging it up. I actually found the connection later on. I'll give you just like an overview of it. I won't go into all the detail, but all of us get messages from our parents, and they're not messages where the parents are saying, I'm going to give you this message to mess your head up. That's not the way it is, but we all get messages. It's just the way things are. Messages happen, and they're usually unintentional, and these were certainly unintentional. My mom's messages to me basically amounted to this, that I am in some way emotionally responsible for everyone else in my life. Now, did she actually say that to me? No, not even close. But that's what it all added up to, that I am emotionally responsible for everyone else in my life. And then my dad's message to me was a message of monetary lack. Now, did we lack for anything growing up? Absolutely not. Did my dad lack for anything when he retired? No, he retired very well. But nevertheless, because both he and my mom grew up in the Great Depression, they had that depression mentality. And so all the time that I was growing up and all the time that my dad was alive, I kept getting the same message over and over again. You have to watch the money. You have to be careful. You have to budget everything. You have to be very stringent about how you spend it. You have to track everything and all that. It was a constant lack mentality that went on and on and on and on. So you combine the two together. On the one hand, you are responsible for everyone else's emotional state. And on the other hand, you have to always have tight reins on the money. That's not a winning combination, but it is a combination when you put it together. Because when you realize this disconnected thing about how you're emotionally responsible for somebody else and for anybody else, start connecting that to a mentality of monetary lack. Whoa, that all of a sudden starts to become a thing. And that's what I've just been kind of uncovering over the last few days. That's a really big thing that I still need to find a way to just put to rest. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Well, and that's where, you know, most of the emotional incongruence or the emotional blocks or whatever term you want to use for it are based, you know, on again, misperceptions or a perspective that has been, you know, you behave a certain way or the way your family, the way they responded to things or their importance. And, you know, where you put your energy in those thoughts, and you get emotional blocks that are sometimes impossible to see. Now, they're usually easy for somebody else to see.
Yes, right.
You know, it's just you're sitting there going, really? You don't see it. It's more baffling they don't see it.
Yes.
But you know, because it's you know, I keep I have a friend. This is going to seem very very odd at the beginning, but he this has been many years ago. He was dating this woman, or actually got a very brutal divorce from his wife. And he's from New Jersey, and she was, you know, she had this really bleached blonde hair, just like the Jersey Shore character. She could have been a character in Jersey Shore. It just, let's just say she wasn't the nicest lady on the planet. And so, and for me, that's a pretty strong statement for me. Anyway, he moves down to Florida, and that's where I get to know him. Well, he meets this woman who I don't meet her for a while. They have this great relationship. He says, well, all of a sudden I meet her, and he looks identical to his ex-wife. Well, it isn't long before she is really just creating these really difficult situations, threatens to call the police on him for hitting her, even though he's never hit her. And I mean, just all these scenarios over and over, and this goes on and on. Well, he eventually leaves her. His third girlfriend that I get to meet looks identical to the first two, and behaves the same way. And at some point you're going, what is that? What do you keep? And he could not see it.
Yeah.
And what helped is I actually had 3 pictures of all of them, and I laid them on the counter for him. And I said, you've been with the same woman 3 times in a row. They just have different names.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that visual that helped you go, what am I attracted? Why?
Yeah, right.
He never saw it until it was, and to everybody else, it was like, oh yeah, you just keep dating the same woman. And it's a much longer story than that, but there is this emotional stuff within us that goes way back often that creates these things. And the most common is handed down from your family, because that's where a lot of this stuff gets instilled from a very young age, even when you don't realize you're doing it. And it has to, and it can happen in either direction. It's just what you're picking up on. So it's very, when in Dan's letter, when he talks about this, he will continue to work hard. He's obviously he's having success with the law of attraction, and now as he makes these further discoveries, he will be able to say, I need to apply the same strategy that got me my health back without me even trying to my money. And when he figures that out, it will come easily and quickly for him.
And just that example you gave just now about the man who had dated 3 women who were all the same, and he didn't notice it, he didn't see it until it was, thrust in front of his face. That phenomenon is a very common phenomenon, and Dan actually expresses it in his email when he says, what I've noticed is that all the good stuff that has happened to my family has come through my wife, but seems to come when I'm feeling good. In other words, it's really clear he's the one who's attracting it to everyone except to him. To him, it's not clear at all. He thinks it's all coming from his wife. And that's the phenomenon you just described. Everybody else can see it except for you. Everyone else can tell that here's what your pattern is except for you. You can't see your own pattern. That's what makes all this stuff so hard, is we don't know our own patterns.
Yeah. And that's the beauty right there. The beauty of the awakening of seeing your own patterns, that's where it starts, because people you don't get jobs, or why do I have great interviews and this doesn't happen, or why do these all these questions come up, and you find yourself in the same scenario. Why does this keep happening to me?
Yeah.
Well, it isn't that you're cursed. It's the question becomes, why am I attracting the same thing?
Yes.
Why is there's a statement somebody made the other day. I have done the exact same thing. This person perceives himself to be very lonely, and he's posted last night, I've done the exact same thing on Thanksgiving on Halloween for the last 9 years. And so I was on fire apparently last night on Facebook. I wrote back to him. I said, that's baffling. And I said, maybe next year don't do the same thing. And maybe things will be different, And at least he had a sense of humor about it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, he said, I realized that helped.
Well, this has definitely helped me. I think we've helped Dan. I hope we've helped Dan. And the only bad part is that I have to wait another week before I talk to you again. But Joel, this has been great, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Always good to talk to you, my friend. I hope you have an incredible week. And Dan, thank you so much for writing in.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.